That's how it starts. Not using a whistling, but without a highlight reel. With a verbal grenade thrown into the WNBA center. Cunningham, Sophie, renowned for her perseverance on the court, simply did anything that was unexpected. She used a few to set the league on fire. Words that are explosive. If you don't believe, the league's face is Caitlin Clark. You're stupid. It's not shadow. That's a bolt of lightning crashing down on each. Every skeptic, every executive hiding behind a public relations script. And at that very moment, Sophie wasn't simply telling it like it was. She was expressing the reality of a whole. Supporters who had been holding their breath. Those words didn't take long to go viral. The social media world exploded like a volcano. Instagram, Twitter, TikTok. The video was shared by millions of people, converting it to slow-motion edits using dramatic music and subtitles. However, this was not only a player venting into the empty space. Sophie Cunningham turned into something quite different. She turned into the bodyguard for Caitlin Clark, a sign. The first one with the guts, the protector, to publicly state what so many were also too scared to whisper. And after that, there was no way out once the floodgate opened. Back. Because this was more than just protecting a colleague. This had to do with removing a disguise from a league that has been taking sides and making money off of the celebrity of Caitlin Clark while feigning she is but another novice. The message. Sophie didn't send a subtle message. She dialed out the silence, the hypocrisy, the resentment, and above all, she called biting out the NBA's risky gamble. What feeds them is the hand, the participant, putting eyes on screens, butts in chairs, and jerseys are being hung out on the backs to dry. Sophie then remarked, "Not on my watch." That candor was gut-wrenching. Punch. Fans were already incensed about. A voice was given to Caitlin's therapy. At last, an individual from the league had the guts to express who they were, yelling from the bleachers. The devotion, the unusual, unvarnished, and in dire need. Additionally, as a video, it became evident that it spread like wildfire. This wasn't the opinion of a single player. This served as a call to action. However, what Sophie didn't anticipate that what she would say would be only the start. The instant she spoke, the league's brittle public relations split open. And what came out wasn't only assistance. It was anger. It was heartache. It was confirmation. Sophie. The first thread had been pulled by Cunningham. The entire WNBA story was now starting to fall apart. From the exterior, it could have appeared to be a normal fight, an additional physical game in a difficult league. However, what transpired during the Connecticut Sun versus Indiana Fever showdown was an igniting spark. Everything, once again, as Caitlin Clark took a severe foul. Spectators may observe her facial anguish, the annoyance, the fatigue. She pushed JCS aside. Sheldon. The interaction is too strong to overlook. Presently, Sophie Cunningham intervened, not in words, but with rage. She made no hesitation. Suddenly, Sheldon was flung to the ground by her, not leaving out of something, but out of carelessness. Much deeper, rage for weeks or even months of accumulated stress. The cameras captured it. The fans sensed it. Additionally, the WNBA. The only thing to do was listen. This wasn't merely another argument. This was a proclamation, a line of battle drawn on nationwide television. Furthermore, it wasn't only physical. It was intimate since Sophie had seen it coming. She had overheard before Clark even fastened her. There were murmurs. Fever jersey on the bus and in the dressing rooms. Rides among veterans in low voices. People were conspiring. We will demonstrate. Tell her the truth about the W. It wasn't competition. It served as a warning,
and
Sophie was aware of it. However, in contrast to the remainder of, she didn't dismiss the league.
she
Omitted the phrase, "It's just the way it is." She recalled their discussions.
and
When Clark got there, she recalled them. Shoved repeatedly and repeatedly until something broke within of her. Sophie wasn't responding to a single infraction.
she
Was reacting to a culture, a campaign, a disease within the system. Additionally, in that, she transformed herself into a emblem. Not only a WNBA player anymore. She was now a warrior, a protector, a name that each and every individual in the arena would recall, as she didn't simply observe unfairness. She rushed towards it. What transpired following that game wasn't just a chat in the locker room.
it was
A moment that permanently cemented their relationship. I continued to read Caitlin Clark and I went to. Sophie uttered a single word. Lastly, one word was all that was required, and everything was different. At that time, Clark was not a famous person.
she was a
Novice, a colleague, a young lady who would carried a storm on her in silence. Back, at last, experiencing what it was like to be protected. Sophie's response, I received. You weren't only reassured.
that
Was a pledge, a contract that was signed in sweat and rage. It was an instance when strengthened their solidarity, changed their team spirit, and introduced the Indiana. They were closer than ever to fever.
and
It was felt by everyone in that locker room. Something had changed. Something had been born. It wasn't about ex-boyfriends and no more O's. This had to do with family, honor, and respect. And from there forward, everyone was aware that if you arrived for, you take care of Sophie first, Caitlin. It is now an unwritten rule. Indestructible. Additionally, the fans witnessed it as well. There were more than just viral videos and quotes after the game. It was evidence that, at last, someone got up. That Clark, despite the league's silence, wasn't by themselves. That instance in the locker, it wasn't the end of the world.
it was
The start of an action. However, Sophie wasn't finished. By no means. The league itself is the next goal. She ripped via the WNBA's well-preserved exterior as a buzzsaw, revealing a framework that takes advantage of its stars while ignoring them. Under duress. Her rage was surgical, exact, and she didn't say anything when she did refrain. She attacked the referees, the executives, including the head of the Fever. Sophie highlights what fans have. All season they screamed, Caitlin Clark receives. Fouled in a different way. She was struck by opponents. Late, snatch up her jersey and yank her on screens, and the referees turn their heads away. Repeatedly, as if by clockwork. Sophie plainly stated, if I were that person, I'd be ejected. However, Caitlin had no whistle. No justice, no protection.
and when she
Was given a $900 fine for her behavior. Sophie chuckled. Our fines are a joke, she said. Stated. Because in her opinion, advocating for Clark was a liability. It was a responsibility.
no
League politics could silence her. No more. Because this is the actuality. The WNBA is in a good position. More people are paying attention to it than before. More money, more fans, more headlines. However, it's all based on one participant. Additionally, those making money are the same people that are allowing her to be assaulted game after game. When Sophie noticed that, she called it out. Additionally, when nobody else, she said what she would say. Clearly, loudly, without apology. If you continue to deny that Caitlin Clark serves as the spokesperson for the WNBA, you are a moron. It wasn't an insult. It was a blast of truth. However, this wasn't limited to fines and referees. Sophie went further than that.
she
Revealed the unsightly rippling undercurrent across the league. The envy, the Bitterness, the icy stars from the veteran. The snarky dives-in players. The clout-chasing attacks and interviews. Encased in phony praise.
Sophie.
Referred to as petty, poisonous, and destructive to oneself. She omitted names.
She was not required to.
Everyone was aware, precisely, who she was referring to.
The
same athletes who begged for years to. Now, more people are attempting to drag down the lone female bearer.
Why?
Due to her failure to pay her dues.
Due to
a stadium was sold out before she ever. The WNBA court was touched. That bitterness is poison. Sophie was aware of it. She grasped the light and challenged the lead to admit it. Tough love was not what this was.
It
was an initiation for rookies.
It was
targeted harassment that is passed off as
custom.
Worst of all, the leadership made it possible. The press played on both sides. They gave Caitlyn a cheer one moment, then made fun of her. And while everything was going on, the fever, the league and the president were mute. In the absence of the commissioner, the officials
blind.
It wasn't only that their quiet hurt
Clark.
She was betrayed by it. The voice of Sophie raged, however, and it compelled a taking stock. Supporters came together. The players started, like posts sharing tweets and gradually awakening to the knowledge that this wasn't limited to Clark. It concerned every single one of them. If the league could do this, what chance did they have to reach their brightest star? Has anyone else? Then it took place. The world noticed. Media that formerly avoided the problem and ran stories instead. Regarding Clark's care, sports programs discussed Sophie's remarks. Commentators, who initially discounted the dispute, were now compelled to face it. Sophie hadn't
just made a teammate angry.
She had altered the story. Overnight, her social media took off. Between 200,000 and more than 1 million fans in less than 2
days.
Crowned an enforcer on the internet. The new anti-hero in the WNBA is the bodyguard. The timeline was overflowing with fan changes.
Slow
film of the Sheldon takedown in motion. In the background are war drums. Captions, such as "Keep the Queen safe." It wasn't only
excitement.
It was a revolution. Even now, Sophie was honest. It was only me. Being me, she said. I didn't even seize. Grabbing her by the hair. It wasn't staged. It wasn't for clicking. It was instinctive and unfiltered. A result of each time she observed. Her teammate is treated rudely.
And now,
she represents a movement.
Due to
below the viral celebrity and movie alterations, something quite human was present. The heart of Sophie's behavior. Virtuous rage, devotion, and affection. This had nothing to do with branding. This wasn't a strategic career move.
Sophie
Cunningham did not press a button to followers. Because no one else did, she took action. She had a look of emotion in that. The performance was no longer the legendary clip. It was intimate. It's impossible to fake that kind of flames. Furthermore, that cannot be manufactured. Sword of faith. The voice of her mother reverberated in her head throughout that hectic moment. If you intend to take action, avoid being catty. Take it seriously. And Sophie did. She didn't mince words. She didn't have a tantrum for show. She through her, she whispered, planting her feet. No more actions. In a league where several people bite their tongues out of fear of backlash. She tore off the muzzle. Away. The crowd didn't merely cheer. They got up. Because at last someone had the courage to take necessary action. And it wasn't only the fire that burned. It dispersed. Once silent, other players started to participate. They began to like posts that retweeted videos in support of Clark. Of the instant Sophie refused to back down. Although it wasn't loud, the camaraderie was expanding like a wind-catching ember. So accustomed to sweeping drama under the WNBA. There was now a movement developing in the rug. On its benches, in its locker rooms, in its press conferences. The guys witnessed the strength. In reality. And now that power was human. Sophie's. What began as a single act of protection turned into a surge of